She had nothing but a warm smile and a tired soul. He had everything: power, money, and secrets. But one ordinary day in a dusty corner diner, their worlds collided. And that smile, the kind that knew pain, shook the billionaire's empire to its knees. If you believe kindness can change lives, this story will stay with you forever. Don't just watch, feel every moment, like, comment, and share this with someone who needs a reminder of humanity. Subscribe for more stories that hit deep. I wasn't anything special. Just another face behind the counter, apron always a little stained, hands rough from washing too many dishes. Most days I smelled like coffee and cheap grease. I worked 2 jobs, one at the diner during the day and I cleaned offices at night. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Rent came first, food if there was anything left. But I smiled anyway. Not because life was good, but because I didn't know what else to do. The diner was old, paint peeling off the walls, a jukebox that didn't work, and a bell above the door that always rang a second too late. On rainy mornings, everything looked a little sadder. The windows would fog up, and the leaky roof would leave a wet trail near booth 7. We had regulars, old men with nowhere to go, tired nurses just off the night shift, and the occasional trucker passing through. Most of them tipped in nickels and quarters if they tipped at all. But I knew their names, I knew their stories, and I gave them the same smile I gave everyone, the kind that said, "I see you." People don't really look at waitresses, they look through us, like we're part of the furniture. But every now and then someone would pause, just for a second, and smile back. That was enough, just to feel human, just to remember I still mattered. Even when life felt like it was closing in, that tiny moment kept me going. I didn't dream big. I didn't expect miracles. I just wanted to make it to the next paycheck without breaking. And so I smiled. Tired, cracked, but real. Because sometimes, when you have nothing left to give, a smile is the only thing you still own. You said, "I remember the day he walked in like it just happened." It was one of those cold, grey mornings where the rain never really stops. Just drizzles, like the sky's too tired to cry properly. The diner was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every clink of a spoon sound louder than it should. I was wiping down the counter, half listening to a weather report playing from the old radio when the door creaked open. He didn't look like he belonged there. Tall, clean-cut, expensive-looking coat that hadn't seen a raindrop. He paused just inside the door like he was trying to remember how he even got there. Then he walked to a corner booth and sat down without saying a word. No phone in his hand, no laptop, no airs, just stillness. That kind of stillness you only see in people who are really, really tired. I went over with the usual smile, the one I practiced every morning in the mirror, and asked what he'd like. He looked up slowly, almost surprised to be spoken to. "Just coffee," he said. His voice was low, polite, but distant, like he was here, but not really here. I brought his coffee and left him alone, didn't press, didn't hover, just did my job. That's what we do. We serve and we keep moving. When I came back to clear his cup, he was gone. But the tip he left, it was $100 bill for 1 cup of black coffee. I thought it was a mistake. People like me don't see that kind of money lying casually on a table. I looked around, half expecting a camera crew to jump out. But no, just rain tapping the windows and the echo of a man who didn't say much, but somehow said everything. After that first visit, he started coming in more often. Always in the same booth, always alone, always ordering the same plain cup of coffee. No cream, no sugar, just black. Like he needed it bitter to match something inside. I never pried. I've learned people open up on their own time, if they ever do. But little by little, he started talking. It began with simple things, a comment about the weather, a question about what pie was fresh. Then, one morning, he asked me why I always smiled. I laughed, told him if I stopped smiling I'd probably cry and I don't have time for that. He looked at me for a long second. Not in a creepy way, just, like he was trying to understand something that didn't fit into his world. I learned his name was Michael. He didn't say what he did, not at first, but it wasn't hard to guess he came from money, real money, the kind that buys silence. Still, the more we talked, the more I realized something. He wasn't full of himself. If anything, he was weighed down. There was this heaviness in his eyes, like he'd seen too much and still couldn't make sense of it all. He started asking about me, about my second job, about how I got through the day. I told him the truth, not in some dramatic way, just plain. Rent, bills, helping my mama when I could. I think it shocked him that someone could live so close to the edge and still smile like it didn't hurt. One morning, he said, "You have no idea how rare that is." I didn't know what he meant exactly, but something in his voice made me pause. Like maybe in all his wealth, he was starving for something I still had. It was a Tuesday when everything shifted. I remember because it was slow, even for a weekday, and the rain outside had finally stopped. I hadn't seen Michael in a few days, which wasn't like him. He never said much, but his presence had become familiar, comforting in a strange way. That morning, just as I was stepping out to take the trash, I saw his car parked off to the side, near the back of the lot. Engine off, windows up. I almost didn't notice him inside until something told me to look again. He was sitting completely still, both hands gripping the steering wheel. His head was down. It wasn't just a bad day kind of look, it was something deeper, something broken. I knocked on the window gently. He jumped a little, then rolled it down. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept or had been crying. I asked softly, "You okay?" He hesitated. Then he said, "No, not really." There was silence. I didn't know what to say, not exactly, but something just came out of me. I said, "You don't have to be okay today. Some days, surviving is enough." He looked at me like I had spoken a language he hadn't heard in years. Then, for the first time, he told me the truth about the scandal, the investigation, the media vultures tearing him apart. The walls were closing in, and he didn't know who he could trust anymore. I just listened. I didn't offer advice or try to fix anything. I wasn't there to save him. But in that moment, my presence, my honesty, it was enough. That day, something shifted. I stopped seeing him as a billionaire. He stopped seeing me as a waitress. We were just two tired souls holding on to whatever light we could find. The next morning, he didn't show up, nor the day after. A week passed. That corner booth sat empty like it was waiting for him. I tried not to worry, but I did. It's funny how quickly someone can go from being a stranger to a part of your routine, of your world. On the 8th day, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee before my shift started, his usual. I poured a cup and set it on his table anyway, even though I knew he wasn't coming. I guess I just needed to feel like I hadn't imagined all of it. That connection, those conversations, they had meant something, at least to me. That night, I went home and wrote a little note. Nothing big, just a few words. "You're more than your money. Don't let the world tell you different." I didn't even know if he'd see it, but I folded it and tucked it under the saucer the next morning, just in case he came back. Still, no sign of him. But I left that coffee out for him every day, always with a fresh note. Sometimes just a quote, sometimes a small joke. I didn't expect anything in return. I didn't want anything, really. It just felt right, like the one small thing I could do. Then one morning, I came in and found something on the table instead, a sticky note written in quick, almost shaky handwriting. It said, "Thank you. Your words kept me alive this week." That was it. No name, no explanation, just those few words. I held the note for a long time. In that moment, I realized something. Even the smallest kindness can be the thing someone holds on to when everything else falls apart. I didn't expect to see his face on the news. Not like that. It was a slow evening at the diner, and the old TV above the counter was playing a local broadcast, mostly background noise. But then I heard his name, Michael Warren, the billionaire. CEO tech mogul. The screen flashed his photo, clean cut, sharp suit, the same eyes I saw every morning over coffee. My hands froze mid-wipe on a table. The anchor's voice was cold, detached. Allegations, lawsuits, mass layoffs, stocks crashing, boards stepping down. They called it one of the biggest scandals in corporate history. The fall of an empire, they said. But all I saw was him, quiet, thoughtful, lost in his own mind, sitting in that corner booth trying to hold himself together. Customers were whispering, pulling out their phones, reading the headlines out loud like it was just another story. But to me, it wasn't. I knew the man who sat behind that name, not the billionaire, not the boss, just Michael. The one who once looked at me like my words were the only thing tethering him to the world. That night when I got home, I sat in silence. No TV, no music. I thought about how heavy the world must have felt on his shoulders. All that pressure, all that money, and still no peace. And I wondered if he was okay. I hoped, wherever he was, he still had the note. The one that told him he was more than his bank account, more than the headlines. Funny how people think money makes you safe, but in the end, it was just paper burning in the storm. And all I could think was, I hope he still remembers that someone saw him, really saw him, before the world tore him apart. He came back on a Thursday. No warning, no fanfare. Just walked through the diner door like any other customer. But this time, he looked different. No suit, no watch, no polished shoes. Just jeans, a faded hoodie, and tired eyes that somehow seemed lighter, like he'd been through fire and survived. I almost dropped the coffee pot when I saw him. He gave me a small smile, the kind that says thank you without a single word. Then he went straight to his old booth and waited, like no time had passed. I walked over, heart racing, unsure what to say. But before I could speak, he looked up and said, I didn't come here to disappear. I came back to say thank you. I sat across from him, even though I wasn't supposed to. The place was half empty, and for once, I didn't care about rules. He told me everything, how the company crumbled, how he lost his fortune, his friends, his reputation. But he didn't talk about it like someone bitter. He spoke like someone who had been broken open and finally saw the truth. He said my words, my notes, my smile had been the only steady thing in his life when everything else was noise. That for the first time, someone saw him without wanting anything. You reminded me I was still human, he said. Not a headline, not a number. I didn't know what to say. I just reached across the table and gave his hand a quick squeeze. That was enough. Sometimes we wait for grand gestures, big moments. But the quiet ones, those are the ones that change lives. That morning, I realized it wasn't the money or the crisis that changed him. It was the simplest thing of all, being seen and being cared for without condition. I thought that was the end of it, just a thank you, maybe a little closure, and then he'd disappear again into whatever life he was rebuilding. But before he left that day, he asked me to step outside with him for a minute. I untied my apron, confused but curious, and followed him out into the cool morning air. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, then looked at me and said, I'm starting something new, something real this time, not about profits, about people. I didn't say anything, I just listened. He went on to tell me he was building a foundation, one that would help low-income workers, waitresses, janitors, bus drivers, people who are the backbone of everything, but who are seen the least. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, I want you to help lead it. I laughed at first. I thought he was joking. Me? A waitress who barely made it through high school, who scraped by on tips and leftovers. He nodded like he could hear my thoughts. You understand people in a way no degree ever could. This started because of you. I want you to be part of it. My throat tightened. No one had ever offered me anything like that. Not because they saw potential, not because they believed in me. I wasn't used to hearing I need you without strings attached. I told him I'd think about it, but deep down I already knew the answer. Sometimes life doesn't knock, it whispers. And in that moment, I realized my story wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about stepping into something bigger. Not because I was lucky, but because even in the darkest moments, I had chosen to keep showing up, with nothing but a tired smile and an open heart. Saying yes wasn't easy. I was scared, terrified, if I'm being honest. I didn't know the first thing about foundations, programs, or anything with a title that sounded important. I still had rent to pay, dishes to wash, late shifts to cover. But something in me had changed. For the first time in my life, someone had handed me a door and trusted me to walk through it. So I did. The transition was slow. I still worked mornings at the diner while helping him plan in the afternoons. At first, I felt out of place in those meetings, surrounded by people in suits using big words, moving fast. But then he'd look at me, steady, patient, and remind me why I was there. "You know what it feels like to be invisible," he'd say. "That's what makes you powerful." Bit by bit, I found my voice. I started listening to stories like mine, a single mum working 2 jobs and sleeping in her car, an older man laid off, struggling to start over, a young woman skipping meals so her little brother could eat. And every time I thought, that was me, that is me. We built programs that made a difference: housing support, job training, mental health help. But more than that, we built something that said, you matter. And not because of what you earn, but because of who you are. I never imagined my smile, the same one I wore behind a greasy counter, would be the reason a billionaire changed his life. But sometimes that's all it takes. One quiet act of kindness. One moment of being seen. And the courage to keep showing up even when no one claps. That was the beginning of a new chapter. One I didn't see coming, but one I'll never stop being grateful for. Looking back now, it still feels unreal. Sometimes I sit with a cup of coffee, just like the ones I used to pour, and think about how a tired smile in a rundown diner turned into something that touched hundreds of lives, maybe even thousands. But it wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it was simply human. Michael and I still talk, though our lives look nothing like they used to. He's no longer trying to prove anything. And me. I've stopped hiding behind just a waitress. I speak at events now. I've helped design programs. I've mentored young women who remind me so much of myself, full of grit, unsure of their worth. I tell them the same thing I learned the hard way. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes quiet kindness can shake the world. The foundation grew into something beautiful, not perfect, but honest. We focused on dignity, not pity, on listening, not lecturing, and it worked because it came from a place of truth. Real people helping other real people. I still visit the diner sometimes. They kept my old booth, even when they remodeled. The bell still rings late, and the coffee still tastes burnt. But it's home. It reminds me where it all started, and every now and then someone walks in looking like the world's a little too heavy. I smile at them, not out of habit anymore, but from a place of knowing, because I remember what it felt like to be unseen. I remember what it meant when someone finally did see me. This story isn't about a billionaire or a waitress. It's about what happens when we stop looking past each other and start looking into each other. That's the legacy. That's the real wealth. And that's what I'll carry with me forever. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was life, raw, painful, beautiful. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Your smile could change someone's day too. Subscribe and share, because kindness is the most powerful currency.